Welcome for those of you that are new to my class and new to Feldenkrais. Is there anybody that's never done a Feldenkrais lesson before? Yeah, maybe Dina, a couple people. Okay, otherwise everybody's done a few or a lot of Feldenkrais. So usually with my classes, we start the lesson usually right at the beginning. Sometimes I'll show a few photos or anatomy images. But tonight I'm just going to talk a little bit about this series and my interest in the series, the subject matter, and then we'll get into the lesson. As I was saying, it's most important that you can just hear me well during the lesson. I won't be demonstrating. So if there's ever a moment that's in the lesson that you're not clear about the directions, I would suggest you just continue to listen as I'll repeat the directions. And more than anything, just start exploring what you think I mean. And then after the movement lesson, I open up the space for questions and conversation about your experience. And that's always optional. You can stay and listen, or you can stay and join the conversation. There is often a lot of rich learning that happens during that conversation. But also, if you have a very rich physical somatic experience during the lesson, you may choose to stay in that and not engage with the screen in the more typical way that we engage with the screen, since we are really working with habits, with muscular habits, and perhaps even habits that show up when you're engaging with devices. So just keeping that in mind if you decide if you do or do not want to stay after the lesson to listen to conversation or be in conversation. So just making sure that you have a comfortable place to lie on your back. And in these lessons, your comfort is your priority. My proposals are just proposals. And really thinking about that with this series that I've titled Autonomy and Personal Freedom. So I've been thinking a lot about what it means to have this sense of freedom or feeling free in the body. And how do we develop that autonomy to take care of ourselves when it's already been instilled in us by educational systems, other systems, to often ignore our sensations and just keep going. And sometimes it's even told to try harder, right? Sometimes in a physical kind of exercise class, like try harder. So here it's the opposite. In this kind of aware way of moving, listening to what your sensation or your feeling is telling you. And the lessons will be recorded. So even if you rest a lot, or even if you fall asleep, your comfort is much more important. So as I was pondering this idea of freedom, I think it includes the ability to really make our own decisions, the ability to feel strength and awareness that we can physically and emotionally move in many directions with ease. And Feldenkrais would talk about posture, or a potent state of being, as the ability to move in any direction without hesitation or preparation, so that there's always more than one option to choose between. And with that, instead of looking to others to tell me what to do or to approve of what I do with the body or other, instead looking inward. So we're going to be exploring some of those really rich ideas and principles of the method. And one of the things we'll explore is moving in such a way that we distribute the effort throughout the whole of ourselves evenly. And when we can work proportionally, or when the large muscles of the body do more of the work, then the smaller muscles are more available to us to do the more dexterous activities. And when we have this way of moving where we can distribute our effort, we can do things in a way where movement becomes more elastic or more adaptable. And what I mean, I'm thinking about what do you mean? What do you mean by that, Sarah? So we all have some kind of habitual way of holding ourselves. And we can think about those habitual ways of holding ourselves as kind of holding us back from making these other decisions or making these other choices, especially if we don't have an awareness or have a sense of what we're actually doing. So take a moment here as you're sitting or standing or wherever you are to just imagine, how would you like to experience yourself? How would you like to experience yourself in standing, in walking, in being in the environment? How would you like to take in the world around you? And so it's really a question about the quality of how you would experience yourself and the way that you would find this elasticity or adaptability and openness to experience. And then it's also knowing when we need to be self-protective and when we don't. And that self-protection creates a particular tone, muscular tone in the body, usually a higher tone. And we can sometimes get stuck in that, and then those habits prolong. So again, we're going to be exploring that. When the tone of those habitual contractions is lowered, it leaves a person capable of sensing and feeling a new way of being, a new state of being. So it's with that intention that we'll go into these lessons with this sense of curiosity of kind of what our potential is. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I'll end with this little conversation, not conversation, because it's more of a one-way conversation, of one of Moshe's, one of his greatest sayings, which is, the only thing that is fixed about our behavior is the belief that it is so. So I'm going to have you come up to stand. And you can stand any direction. You don't need to direct yourself or orient yourself to the screen. And begin tonight in standing to see if you can sense, when you think about it, where do you hold your past? When you think about your past, where is it? And this might be seem like a strange question or something you haven't pondered before. And so some people will sense that maybe they're standing on the past and rising above it. Some people may sense that the past is behind them and they're moving forward. So when you think about your past, where do you go? Do you feel it somewhere in your body, in your torso? Do you feel it more on one side of you or more to the space around you? So how would you answer that question? How do you sense and experience the past? And the proposal I'll make for you is that unnecessary effort represents the past. It represents the way we adjusted to our development as infants and children. And the more that you can reduce the unnecessary effort, the more options you will have for feeling and sensing. Okay, so come to lie on your back. Take your time, find a comfortable place on your back. So these lessons use subtle movements so that we can come to a place that's really precise, a place where the skeleton provides us the tone we need, and where there's a minimal tone for that support, so that we're not bound by that muscular habit that we could call our conditioning. So this lesson and these lessons are really an opportunity to be very compassionate to yourself. To appreciate everything that has happened to you in your life, and maybe this very new idea that I'm bringing to you of a muscular habit that represents the past, and how we can soften that. So as you're on your back, notice the intelligence of the floor. In what way does the floor give you information? How does the floor speak to you? So the surface you're touching always indicates to the body some kind of potential for movement. So just right now, you're exploring the connection to the floor. And you could think about it as the ability to respond to the floor. And maybe you're thinking about the weight, this kind of dropping down into the floor. But the floor is already there. So you actually don't have to go any further. You can feel how the floor is there to support you. The question we'll ask is, how does the floor inform what we can do? So as you're here, you can have your eyes closed if you're comfortable with that. Could you take a moment and imagine rolling to one side and coming up to sit? And as you imagine that, which side did you imagine rolling to? And then you can begin just the very beginning of that movement of rolling to one side, that side that you chose, and listen to the pattern of pressure onto the floor. And then you come back onto your back. And it can just be the very beginning of that idea of rolling to your side as if you were going to come up to sit. And in order to do that, you must be engaged with the floor. So you make just the very first part of the movement and listen to the sequence, how you find the floor as a source to move from. And as you make the movement, you can listen to the fluidity, the integrity of the movement. And you're just going to the side that's easiest, that side that you imagined. You can do just the beginning of it and then come back onto your back. And you're listening to how you integrate the whole of yourself to do that. And if there's something familiar, great. And now begin to go to the other side. And listen to whether the movement on this side has a similar kind of cohesiveness or integration. For many of us, the second side, our second choice, may have more pieces, or that a sense of fluidity breaks down in some way. Yeah, and then you might roll to the first side you chose once, and then to the second side, just to compare. And you may be finding different things, like maybe it's the way that your head likes to turn more easily, and that brought you there. It could be so many things. Okay, and then come back onto your back and place a single fingertip at the very, very highest point of your head, the crown of your head. What feels like the middle. And with that finger, you're going to begin to draw a line towards your forehead. This line will divide you into a right and a left, and the finger will go down the forehead, down the nose to the tip of the nose, down the center of the lips, down the center of the chin. Just this light touch, fingertip touching, down to the top of the throat, down the middle of the throat to where you start to feel that little notch above your sternum, and the finger goes right down the center of the sternum, all the way to the base of the sternum. And it continues down the upper abdominal area towards your navel. And it continues down to your pubic bone. And then once you're there, you can release your hand back to the floor and continue to project that line downward. It could be on the floor. Your image of it is on the floor all the way to the space between your feet. So you have this very clear kinesthetic sense for yourself. The memory of the line that you just touched with your finger, and bring your attention to this line, to this midline, or a place that is not to the right and is not to the left. And could you rest for a moment in this middle? Pause for a moment in this place or this quality that's not right and not left, where you're not engaged with either side, but you're just in the middle. Great. And continue that. And I just want to suggest that if your legs are long and you're feeling like you would be more comfortable with your knees bent and your feet standing, please bend your knees and stand your feet. And so you're here right in the middle. And from the middle, could you start to shift your attention to the right? So you can experience the right side of your face, the right side of your neck, the way the right side rests on the floor, your right arm, the right shoulder and the right ribs, the right side of the back of your sacrum and pelvis, all the way down through your right leg. So you listen to the sense of the right side of yourself. And then come back from the right and return to that place within yourself that is the middle, that's not the right and not the left. And slowly start to shift your attention now to the left. And you can start to listen to the difference in the experience of yourself as you shift to the left. Sometimes people will have a very different emotional sense, right to left. One side might feel very light and available, or there's a different sense of vitality. Maybe one side has a different sense of depth or shape. So this means that, right now, as I'm suggesting these things, maybe you're going back and forth across the line and comparing, how does the left side feel compared to the right side? Yeah, and so then really sensing the left side of your face, the back of the head on the left side, your left shoulder, the way that your breath rises and falls on the left side, the way that your left arm is a part of you, the left side of your pelvis, and all the way down to your left leg. And then return from the left side back to this middle, back to this place that's not right and not left. And begin to imagine that there's a plane, some kind of vertical plane, like a translucent plane or a plane of glass that's about 4 feet above you. And it begins to drop down and meet that midline that you drew. So there's this vertical plane, a very, very thin, translucent plane that's coming down to find that midline. And see if you can feel what's the highest point of yourself to the ceiling, that place where the plane would touch first as it starts to drop down. Is it your nose? Is it your sternum? Is it your abdomen? And you imagine this plane infinitely thin, and it meets your midline, and it starts to drop through the middle of you, through the middle of the forehead, the face, through the middle of the sternum, through the middle of the pubic bone, and you sense it drop all the way to the floor, through you to the floor. And you imagine this as the plane comes down through the middle of you, it touches the floor behind you, and you feel, does it touch directly to the middle of the back of your head, or would you need to turn your head at all and make an adjustment? And you sense it coming right through the sternum, center of the pelvis. Great. And then with your eyes closed, slowly start to lift your right hand up and bring your right palm so that your right palm comes to find this plane. So that's right. You imagine this thin, translucent plane, plexiglass or glass, that your right palm comes to. It means all the fingers, all the pads of the fingers touch the plane. That's right. And for a moment, explore the way that your hand can move on this plane. It can move upwards towards your head, downwards towards your feet, forward towards the ceiling, backward towards you. That's right. So you could imagine that it's like your hand, if your hand were washing this plane, your palm is not facing your chest, but your palm is facing that midline where the imaginary plane has come down. That's right. Great. So Joy, you can think about, instead of your hand facing your face and a few others, if you imagine that plane came right from the ceiling, if you even want to take a peek at Dina and see how her hand, that's right. So that's where the planes come down. And for anybody that's not sure, I'm going to show an image here. So if you want to kind of take a moment and come out of your place, you know, I'm not lying on my back, but the plane is coming like this, right through the center. You imagine I'm lying on my back, and the hand would come to that plane. Yeah. So most of you had the image in the mind correctly. Yeah, that's right. So just continue to you can come back to your back, close your eyes, and let this right hand explore the plane, but with the sense that the whole time your hand continues to touch the plane, and it doesn't cross the plane, it doesn't cross the midline. The thumb, the entire palm touch the plane, and you have the sense that you're right there, exactly connected to the plane. That's right, the central line that you're trying to sense. And begin to take your hand in a circle, making a small circular movement with your right hand. And the question is, how can you make this movement in a way that's delicate, that's sensitive? How do you start to organize your shoulder, your ribs, even your back to support the movement so that your hand touches the plane? That's right. And you can explore how your fingers point. Your palm is always touching the plane, but what direction could your fingers point? What are the options? Yeah, feeling how you engage with the floor when your hand comes closer to you and when it moves farther away from you. Great. Then bring your right arm, your right hand down, and listen for a moment to how the movement has affected your ability to sense the right side of yourself. How clear is the connection to your right hand? And notice the effect that this has had on the way the rest of you finds support from the floor. Great. Now bend your knees and stand your feet. And slowly begin to tilt your pelvis in such a way that you feel the upper part of the pelvis and your lower back move a little bit towards the floor. And then tilting the pelvis so that your lower back moves a little away from the floor. So tilting the pelvis up and down. That's right. Towards the tail and then towards the top of the sacrum. And as you do this, could you do it without putting any kind of pressure or push or weight of your feet into the floor? So your feet are touching the floor, but you're not pressing your feet into the floor to find this rocking of the pelvis forward and back. Great. And as the pelvis rocks, notice what's happening through the spine. Does your head tilt in any way? Does your chin come towards your chest or away from your chest at any moment? Sensing your breathing. Noticing if you can release any tone in your jaw, your face. Great. Okay, let the legs lengthen again. And sense your long right leg. And begin to turn your right leg a little bit outward so that you feel the outside edge of your right foot come closer to the floor. And as you do that, if your knee wants to bend, or you can notice when your knee would want to bend to keep bringing the outside edge of your right foot to the floor, and allow your knee to bend when it wants to bend. And as you start to rotate this right leg outward, the outside edge of the right foot starts to find the floor, then begin to slide the foot towards your sitting bone so that outside edge of the foot stays on the floor, and you start to bring your right heel a little towards your pelvis. That's it. And then you can lengthen that right leg long again and just feel that a few times. So the right leg turns outward so that the outside edge of the foot finds the floor, and you draw the right heel towards the head. And as you do that, noticing any movement of the pelvis, can you feel any shift of the pelvis as you rotate the leg, as the heel slides towards your sitting bone? Is there a bit of a rocking or a shift of weight on the floor? So how do you do this? That's right. And begin to be more clear about where you're bringing the sole of your right foot. So your right leg turns open, the right knee bends, the outside edge of your foot is engaging with the floor. and you're sliding the right heel towards your head, but then think as though you're going to bring the sole of your right foot to that plane, to that midline. That's right. So let the sole of your right foot find the midline and then keep it there for a moment. So that means that your right knee will be bent out to the right some amount. And just start to slide this right foot upward a little towards your head and downward a little away from your head on this plane. So keeping as much as you can with comfort, keeping the sole of your foot on this imaginary plane. You don't cross the plane. You're being as precise, as clear as you can that you're right there on the midline. And as you slide your foot upward towards your head and downward away from your head, what can you sense through your pelvis? How does the relationship of the pelvis and the floor change? Great. And then as you slide your foot a little towards your head, could you lift your foot towards the ceiling? And could the sole of your foot explore this plane off the floor? That's right. And finding how you could make a little circle, as if the sole of the foot were cleaning this imaginary plane or pane of glass, making a little circle. Yeah, great. Okay, let that rest. Bring your right leg down, take both legs long, and rest for a moment. And just notice if this movement has awakened your ability to sense your right foot, the sole of your right foot, your right leg, the degree of which your right hip is a little bit more alive in your sensation. Good. Now, slowly lift your right hand and bring your right hand back to the plane and begin to make a circle with the hand on the plane. But see if you can make the movement come from the floor. So generate the movement from the floor. So there is a way in which the shoulder, the back of your head, the back of your chest participates with the floor as your hand moves. A way in which the shoulder glides on the floor. That's right. So more and more you start to make the movement based on how the floor supports the movement, the way your ribs speak to the floor. Great. Slowly bring your right hand back down. Rotate your right leg outward, slide the outside edge of your foot on the floor, drawing the sole of your right foot to this midline. And again, keep the foot on the floor, but just slide the foot a little bit towards the head and away from the head. And notice as you begin to move the foot on the floor, down and up the plane, how do you move your foot? How do you begin to find any movement in your pelvis? If you imagine that there's a string connecting from your head to your foot, and as your foot moves a little away from your head, your chin comes a little down towards your chest. And as your foot moves towards your head, your chin goes a little away from your chest. Great. And then you can explore bringing your foot off the floor. So exploring having that right foot make a circle more in the air, bringing it towards the head, forward towards the ceiling, downward away from the head, backward towards the floor. and feeling, where do you find support to lift your leg? How do you draw the leg into you? What happens to your lower back as you move the foot up and down? How do you use the rest of yourself, the way you are in contact with the floor, to lift your leg from the floor? So it's not just done from the hip joint. Yeah, like you're rolling. Remember when we were tilting the pelvis, how is it that you roll through your pelvis? How is it that you engage your ribs with the floor? Great. Let that go for a moment. Take your leg long and rest. If you need more rest, you might do the movement once or twice and then pause. And I'll keep giving you ideas, and then you can just return when you're ready. But resting when you're ready to rest, and listening to any kind of mental activity within yourself. Maybe there's a quieting of your habitual thinking process, but an alertness or an awareness to the experience of yourself. And so just as you're resting here, listen to the right side of yourself. And slowly bring both your right palm and your right foot to the plane. And if you want to keep your foot on the floor, you can, or your foot can explore in the air. And start to make both the hand and the foot go upward towards your head and downward towards your foot, towards the foot side of your mat. So you're moving the hand and the foot upward and downward together. That's it. Great. And then have both make a circle. So the right hand and the right sole of the right foot are circling on the plane, being as clear as you can that you're not crossing the midline, you're not crossing the plane, you're right there on it. Great. And then circle the other way with this sensitivity to your hand and your foot on the plane. Good. Bring both the foot and the hand towards each other. And then have them start to separate from each other and create a circle so that the hand and the foot are making circles in an opposite direction. And you're still feeling how you engage with the floor to do this. Inviting your ribs to engage with the floor, your pelvis to make the movement. The shoulder slides and responds on the floor. Great. Let it go. Take your arm and your leg down and rest, and return as you're resting to this space that's not your right side. That's not your left side. That's what feels like the middle. And from this middle place, turn your attention to the right side of yourself. And you could come up with a descriptive way of describing how you experience the quality of yourself on the right side. And then you can come back right through the middle and turn yourself to the left so that you can contrast that experience. Great. Now, we'll slowly begin to transfer this experience to the left side. So first, just in your imagination, bring your left palm to the plane. And then slowly, you can actually bring your left palm to the plane and being as clear as you can. So you touch the plane, you don't cross it. It's this infinitely thin plane, finding the middle. And just starting with the hand, taking a few moments to let your left hand explore this midline. And as you move the hand up or down or forward and back or in a circle, right away start to sense how you engage with the floor. How does the shoulder, the ribs on this side, even your breathing and how your breath engages with the floor, how can it support the movement of your hand? Yeah. And that may not be clear, and that's okay. You could feel what it's like to make a really small movement of your hand, like a small circle of your hand. And then if you were to make a much bigger circle with your hand slowly, it may necessitate that more of you gets involved. Great. And let that rest. Bring your left hand down. And then just slowly start to sense your left leg all the way to your left heel. Rotate your left leg outward so that you can start to bring the outside edge of your left foot to the floor. In order to do that, feel when your left knee bends, allow it to bend to the side, and then you begin to draw your left heel towards that sitting bone and bringing the sole of your left foot towards the midline, towards that plane. And go back and forth like that just a few times. You know, you can keep the foot on the floor. You can just continue to explore with the foot on the floor for a while. But when your heel draws towards your head, what kind of movement do you sense in the pelvis? Can you let the belly be soft so that your inhale breath creates an expansive, a full belly? That's right. And then sliding that foot towards the midline and playing with lifting the left foot away from the floor, maybe drawing a circle on this plane with the sole of your foot. That's right. And feeling as your foot comes more towards your head, how does your back engage with the floor? Great. Pause, bring your left leg down. And slowly bring both your left hand and the sole of your left foot to the plane. And start by moving the two together. So if one goes down, the other goes down. If one starts to make a circle, the other starts to make a circle. Yeah, slowly so that you can be very clear. You're making a very clear movement of the two together. And you can notice, is the palm of your hand more alive or is the sole of your foot more alive? Is the sole of your foot completely available to you? Great. Rest. Bring the left arm and left leg down. And even though we've only spent a few moments with this left side, sense the way that the left side is available to you, how you sense your hand and your foot. And you're breathing. And now bend both knees and stand your feet. And bring both hands to the plane. So, but it's like there's a magic magnetic field between your hands. So when you bring your hands together, they can't actually touch. it's like they would slide a little away from each other. There's that infinitely small space between them. So each finger, the thumb, the index finger, the middle finger, the ring fingers, the smallest finger, even the forearms and the elbows, they know each other. And start to take both hands upward towards your head and downward towards your feet. With that infinitely small space between the hands. And see if you can follow the movement with your eyes. Gently follow the movement with your eyes. And feel how you engage with the floor to take your hands upward towards the head and downward towards the legs. And then take the movement forward or towards the ceiling and backward, back towards you. And feel with this movement, how do you engage with the floor? How do you come away from the floor? How do you move into the floor? Yeah, and then start to turn this into a circular movement. And notice, is there any moment where you cross the plane? So how accurate are you? And when your hands are moving in this circle together, which side leads? Which hand leads? So one hand, if one hand leads and one hand follows, could you change the hand that leads? If you really listen to yourself, we'll all find that we have a dominant side, even a dominant side of your face, a dominant eye, dominant side of your tongue. So can you spread this attention equally? Good. Now move one hand forward and one hand back. So one hand to the ceiling and one hand towards you. And they feel how they slide past each other with the smallest amount of space between each other. So they never touch. There's that infinitely small space between the two. That's right. And then start to make a circular movement with your hands, generating the movement from the floor. And at some point, the hands might slide past each other. One hand makes a circle and the other hand makes a circle, perhaps in the other direction, or it's following. That's right. Yeah, going slow enough so that you feel that infinitely small space between the hands. Great, let that rest. Bring your arms down. And just take a moment to sense any connection to symmetry, the availability to experience the right and the left side of yourself, your right arm, your left arm. Good. Now bend your knees and stand your feet if they aren't already, and staying in this comfortable place. So taking care of yourself here, could you widen your knees and bring the soles of both feet to the plane and start keeping your feet on the floor? And so again, there's that infinitely small amount of space between the soles of the feet. And could you move both feet a little bit upward or in the direction of your head, sliding on the floor, and a little bit downward away from your head? It can be very small. And again, feel how you do that. If it's not just from your hip joints, as you slide your heels a little towards you, does the lower back lift a little from the floor? Or does the lower back move towards the floor? How can you find that support from the floor to move your feet? Could you feel as though you're moving the feet from your center, from what your pelvis does, from what your back and your ribs and your abdomen do? Could you initiate moving your feet from there? Does that make the movement any different? And as you move your feet in this way, Is there a foot that leads? Great. And then bring the 2 feet towards your pelvis and then see if you can lift both feet away from the floor. How can you find that support from the floor? So lift the 2 feet at the same time. Great. Now interlace your fingers behind your head. And with the support of your hands, lift your head and bring your feet a little bit towards your nose and your nose towards your feet, and feel what happens with your back, how your mid and low back go towards the floor. And then slowly bring your head and your feet back to the floor and see if your head and your feet can touch the floor at precisely the same moment. And then again, lift your feet, lift your head, bring the head and the feet towards each other, and notice how you round yourself, how you use the floor to lift your feet. Your spine, your back, your ribs. And when your head and your feet come back to the floor quietly. Great. And then leave your head on the floor and let your arms return to your side. And take a moment to, again, lift both feet into the air and find out if you learn something about how you could use your back differently as you lift your feet. You can move your feet towards your head, away from the floor, towards the floor. And do this until you could find a little circle with the feet, as if the feet were on the plane, some approximation of that. Making this little circle with the feet, that's right, and feeling how when your feet come towards your head, how your back and your ribs can engage with the floor. How your pelvis, how your abdomen moves. Good. Now, with your feet, make circles like you're riding a bicycle. So one gets ahead of the other. Slowly, so you can feel again how you engage with the floor. Notice if you go right back into habit. Oh, I ride a bike all the time. So then you just start to do it. But what's happening with that contact with the floor? Good. Okay, rest, take your legs down. Again, feel your sense of connection to the whole of yourself. And for a moment, be in this place that's the middle, not the right and not the left. And notice if that's becoming any more clear. And now for a moment, just play. You can bring both hands and both feet to the plane. And just play with the kind of curiosity of a child who's really just discovering themselves for the very first time. One hand in one direction, one foot in the other direction. If you want to keep your feet on the floor, you can. So anything can take place. Yeah, anything can take place, but you're trying not to cross that line. As accurate as you can be with that line. Where does your curiosity go? Yeah. Great. Pause, let that rest. And bend your knees and stand your feet. And bring your hands to the plane. So the hands come towards each other without touching. And then you can bring your feet to the plane, or you could just imagine bringing your feet to the plane. And this next movement is just in your imagination, just in your imagination. So you imagine your feet going towards the ceiling. You imagine your hands going towards the ceiling. You imagine your head going to the ceiling. Everything in your imagination, everything goes towards the ceiling, but very quickly. So it's just in your imagination, like you very quickly move your hands, your feet, and your head towards the ceiling. And do it in your imagination 3 or 4 times. Imagine springing towards the ceiling, just in your imagination. Great, and then leave it, rest. And notice how you meet the floor, how the floor comes to meet you now. And what would your experience of rolling to one side to come up to sit be like now? Could you start to roll a little in one direction? And as you do that, experience the way the floor supports your movement, your sense of coordination, fluidity to that side. That's right. That moment where you cross the midline and you could come back onto your back and then maybe try the other side, and feeling as you cross the midline, as you roll to that side. And so is that sense of coordination or cohesiveness more available? Is there a different quality? Yeah. And so as you come to one side, you start to come up to sit and come up to stand. And as you come up to stand, first just taking a moment, arriving, feeling the floor underneath your feet. Notice your sense of being dimensional as you stand. If there's something about the quality that's new. And at the beginning of the lesson, I asked you this question of where is your past? Where do you sense your past? So as you come to stand, if you went looking for your past before, and where did you find it? And where do you find it now? Is the past farther away? Do you not find it? Do you find it somewhere else? What has happened? And notice, do you feel more full, more solid, or do you feel some kind of equilibrium? And what about the middle? Is the middle more clear? Where is that line for you? So you look for that clearest line possible, the place that's not right and not left. Yeah. And then another question I could ask you is this different than your habitual way of standing? And if so, can you be curious about that? What's different about the quality? Okay. I'm going to end the lesson there. This is a lesson I've never taught before, and I'm very curious to how it was for you. Like I said at the beginning, if you feel like you want to kind of just stay with your sensations or move on to the rest of your evening, I just want to thank you for coming and exploring a little bit today in this way, in this novel, unique way. And if you have any questions about the series, the series runs for 6 weeks, and we'll keep exploring some fun stuff like this. And for those of you that want to stay, I'll just kind of let people filter out, take a moment before we start conversation.
Thanks, Sarah. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mhm.
Thank you, Sarah. Dina's saying I'm.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Oh, there's Jane. Hi, Jane.
Jane is there?
Yeah.
Hi, Jane.
That was really nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, does anybody have sensations, thoughts, questions, anything they want to say? The floor is yours.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
I thought a lot about, I teach preschool. So a lot of my day is on the floor, up and down, up and down, up and down. And I was thinking the whole time, like, oh my goodness, if I could be that present every time I get up and off the floor, how would my life be different? Because right now it's really hard to get up and off the floor.
How
So
did it
really nice?
Did you find a change from the beginning to the end of the lesson, Dina?
Definitely.
Yeah, cool.
Definitely did.
Great. Yeah. Anybody else?
Sarah, it's Maggie.
Yeah.
I have a sense of a more three-dimensionality. Usually I feel more aware of my front, and I just feel more full.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, afterwards.
Yeah. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel more, I think what Dina said about being present, but also more kind of a weightier presence. You know, I feel heavier or grounded, maybe is a good way to put it, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thanks, Maggie.
I have multiple sclerosis, mostly on my right. So in the beginning, I was really aware of how my right side felt sort of more diffuse, and almost like I could see the color, sort of hazy color, dramatically different. I felt, and at the end, well, I wouldn't say they were the same. My right side felt much more sort of solid and like the left. My arm felt a little off still, or a little sort of like I wasn't sure exactly where it was, or it was kind of hazy, but I felt much more integrated, and the two sides felt much more alike than at the beginning. It's pretty dramatic, actually.
Great. Thanks, Alice. Yeah, Judy. Sorry, Judy, I muted you because it was going back to you. So
a couple of things. On the global level, when we started out, I've been having discomfort in my stomach and lower abdomen the last couple of days, unexplained. But I said, okay, the past must be there in the stomach because that's what's bothering me. And at the end, after all the movements, the discomfort was gone. I mean, it may come back, but it was gone, which was interesting. And of course, I felt more centered and more, better posture. The technical things are my right foot toward the heel and ankle feels stiff. I don't know why. And the other thing I noticed is when you say there's a thin line, when it got to meeting the feet, I looked and I see the heels are further away because I guess I don't have the dexterity to open the legs more. So the heels were further away and the hands were closer, but there was more than a fine line. So.
yeah, thanks, Judy. Yeah, the feet are really the feet, the legs, the hip joints it's really tricky with this lesson. I'm guessing that most people had an easier time bringing their hands to the line with clarity. Maybe it was never the sole of your foot that touched the plane, but it was some part of the inside of your foot that touched the plane. And that's absolutely fine. You know, it's an approximation towards the idea, towards the image. So thanks for bringing that up, Judy. I think that you're not alone in that there was some ease with the hands compared to the feet.
The feet can't make that parallel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad for your shift in your past. You know.
Yes, but I said, I don't know where it's located. Must be my stomach is hurting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering, I was thinking while I was listening and trying, and I didn't look often, but I kept wondering, like, am I really on my center plane? And I kept wondering, do some people, some bodies, do they sense their center plane is more here, like how? And I was like, oh, it'd be interesting to have a mirror on the ceiling to be able to see, like, what I kept wanting to know, what I'm sensing as middle, true middle. And then my question was, do some people just naturally have a middle that's different? Because although we're symmetrical, we're not perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, most people have one side of the spine that's a little bit more engaged, which moves us into some kind of side bend or twist, and there may be scoliosis. It's not so much that we're seeking exact symmetry, even in our muscular tone, but first of all, knowing where is the line for you? Where do you start to find the line? Like at the beginning of the lesson, where do you find the line? Does it become more clear in some way at the end of where the middle of you is? So you're looking for that clearest line possible, definitely without this idea of perfection, like you use that word. And we are by design not symmetric. If you look at our organs, they're very asymmetrical. So I would say, like, less, Dina, about finding or trying to produce some kind of perfection, and staying curious about, oh, like this hand, I think this hand finds the line more easily, or I think this foot really feels this. And then, oh, it's starting to change. Maybe I'm getting more clear here, or some part is still foggy. Where is there this blind spot? So that the learning is more about that curiosity, and the change is going to happen without needing to feel like you have to produce something. Yeah. And again, that's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning. It's a really different way of learning or being in an experience with our body, a way that's less about producing something. Yeah. Yeah, Elizabeth. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, there you go.
Great. Well, I just feel kind of foggy a little bit from just imagining so much and going so slow and everything. But now that I'm awake more, I think that when you said when we brought our leg up, our foot up, or our hands up, what happened in our back. And I was kind of surprised how my back stayed on the floor rather than kind of like hauling my leg up, my back would arch or something. And I think it had to do because we started with this center line that was so clear that it organized me or something in a way that then when I brought up one limb or the other, it was just more centered. And I felt like my back was kind of part of the floor, my whole backside. So that was pretty cool. Because normally I wouldn't do that, but I think having that really clear center line as a focus kind of was very helpful in moving differently. So,
yeah, great. Thanks, Elizabeth.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, anybody else?
Curious if you started and you I can't remember if it was a quote or a phrase, if you can repeat that one again.
Oh, yeah. I think the Feldenkrais phrase, which is, let me find it. Well, one is that he talks about posture, or this potent state, as the ability to move in any direction without hesitation or preparation. And so we were playing a little bit with that when I had you just imagine rolling to one side. What side's easier to roll to? Can both sides be easy and smooth? Do you have the choice? Do you need to prepare a lot to roll to one side? And then the other quote, I've got to find that one. The only thing that's fixed about our behavior is the belief that it is so.
Both those really struck chords with me, really like resonated deeply. I really appreciated hearing those in the beginning. It was really nice. And for me personally, like, I need a lot of preparation these days for moving. I have a heel spur. I have like, I had a terrible triad in my knee, and like, I'm middle aged. So I think I'm at that place where things change and it's like, whoa, feels so different. So anyway,
Yeah.
I appreciated those. And I guess the other question that came to mind was wondering about, like, that's the majority, I think, here are women, is like people who have like mastectomy or even like a amputation. Like, how does that change? And what's some of the theory behind any of that, with like your body either readjusting or what? Like, now I'm thinking about phantom limb syndrome and stuff like that. But when you have an injury like that, maybe is even temporary, like how do you bring all that in?
Yeah. And we're always working with that in different levels. So, when we have an injury, there's a certain tone that creates protection. I was talking about this at the beginning a little bit. So when we have an injury, something's uncomfortable, maybe there's pain, and the body protects that. And that shows up sometimes as pain and as a higher muscular tone. And then we have to learn how to organize the most efficient way around that. And sometimes we don't organize very efficiently around that. And so what the lessons can do is help you sense the effort that may have come from protecting that injury that's no longer needed, how you can kind of unravel some of that tension or that tone so that the body can organize in the most efficient way possible with all of your past, your injuries, your experiences that are not going to go away. They make you who you are. But again, we're looking for that most optimal way to organize so that you can feel ease and grace and fluidity and have options. So, and it's the same thing, even if it's more of an extreme thing, that, using the imagination starts to bring those parts back online in some ways. So you don't even have to move at all, but you could just use your imagination. So that, it's very much in the vein of what we're playing with, Dina. Erin.
So it was funny for me on the first side because my plane, if I'm lying down, my plane ended like here. It didn't continue. So I was just like, and then the second, so with my foot, so the second side, my foot was able to, explore much more. But I think I'll try it again on Sunday. When I stood up, when I was going to get up, I wanted to turn to the side that I don't usually want to. That was the side I was drawn to. It felt so easy. And when I stood up, again, as someone else has already said, I felt so much volume and volume back and back of pelvis, back of heels. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Great. Okay. Yeah, Jennifer. And if anybody feels like, I want to go back into my physical sensation world and you want to take off, you're always welcome to take off as we continue a little conversing. Yeah, Jennifer.
I just wanted to offer another word, and that is, I felt integrated when I stood up, and not just I don't even know what that really means, except I felt it, and got some definition. I mean, I felt grounded. I felt like there were poles through my legs, really taking me into the ground, but integrated in the way that I felt full, but I didn't feel like anything had more importance than any other thing. And I also felt like my past was integrated. I couldn't find it as I had before. And I felt like I feel full and one. So that was pretty exciting.
That's great. Yeah. I love, yes, this sense of wholeness. And I think that's another theme of these lessons that I'm interested in, is how we have this sense of wholeness. And it sounds like your attention was distributed, like about your whole self. So it wasn't just, oh, I can feel my shoulder, but it's like you sense all of you. Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. Okay.
I was going to say what was interesting is hearing some of the other feedback. I felt a bigger sense of lightness at the end. Like, I like the word integrated that was used, but like more like if I try to imagine it, like more self-contained and not so like where do I end? Like, I'm just blah. And like, I know, like I can see some of you, I'm like, okay, I'm one of the bigger bodies in here. And so like to feel lighter at the end was interesting for me. And my past definitely shifted where it was. And it felt less of a hindrance and more of that word integration. I liked it more of like just there and like grounded, but not on the ground, like grounded in like towards my centers, which felt really different and interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Anything else anybody's dying to share? Okay. Last call. For those that are curious about the series, I'll teach this lesson again on Sunday, and then we've got 6 weeks of playing, of staying curious about this. Classes are on Sundays at 4 Central Time, and Wednesdays, today's Wednesday, Wednesdays at 6:30 Central Standard Time. Okay.